and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another stellar installment from very, very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. We have a lot to talk about this morning, and it's from all areas. Everything from so-called affordable housing to Gail Simmons drivel, and Mike Yin thinking that he knows anything about being a Republican. But before I go there, on the way to the studio this morning, I was listening to the Patriot Channel on Sirius XM, and David Webb was on, and he was playing some sound bites from New York Governor Kathy Hochul. Now, of course, she's completely bought into the Zoran Mamdani craze of tax the rich and tax everything that is not nailed down. But she has a new proposal. It's called a common sense tax. And what it is a tax on the top 1%. You know, the people who are so wealthy that, really they just have money sitting around in rooms in their house, and they're like Scrooge McDuck, and they go swimming in their big stacks of money. And they own all of these second homes. And you see, her argument is that, well, these homes sit vacant for most of the year. They're just vacation homes. And so, we really need to get those homeowners to contribute, quote, in a meaningful way to the city, to parks and streets and fixing everything that's wrong. But, they just have to be part of our community. Are they not already by the outrageous property taxes they pay on their small, and they're not even McMansions that we're talking about. We're talking about small downtown Manhattan, downtown New York lofts. You might have a penthouse. It's not a whole house. Now, granted, they're probably several $1 million. But all of those people have to pay high property taxes. And if they sublet those lofts out during the year, well, then they have to pay state income tax on that income. The reason I bring this up is some of us are under this mistaken impression that property taxes and the taxes that people pay on their homes and their second homes, and I've even heard this argument on the floor of the Wyoming House and sometimes in the Senate, that, well, it's these second homeowners, they don't really contribute enough. They need to pay their fair share. They already are. It's called property taxes. And by the way, why is the government entitled to any more of a greater share of somebody's income or their property simply because you happen to be the government? You're not. You see, we have to get back to a place where we respect private property rights, and we respect the income that people earn through whatever craft that they do, whether they're a plumber or a carpenter or an IT tech. Whatever money that a person earns, that's theirs. The government and people in the government are not entitled to it. There is no entitlement there except to say that you have to pay taxes. And even so, the taxes that we charge everybody are far over and above what is absolutely necessary. And you know, I always wondered about this. You always hear politicians say, well, we have to fix the streets. And so we have to pass this tax or that tax. In Sheridan, it happens to be the GPET, General Purpose Excise Tax, that has to be passed. And if we don't do that, we're not going to fix the streets. Well, there are lots of streets in every community that are total pieces of crap that haven't been worked on in years. So why is it when we're told that we have to pass a tax to fix the streets that those streets never get fixed? Well, the answer is obvious, that the tax never was to fix the streets, and the politicians you put in charge never had any intention on fixing them in the first place. You see, all of this rhetoric surrounding paying your fair share and, you know, having high wage or high income people, you know, become a meaningful part of their community is just rhetoric to convince you that these folks need to pay more money. Well, just because someone is more wealthy than you doesn't mean that the money they earn is any less valuable than a minimum wage job at Walmart or at McDonald's. It's just economies of scale. Just because somebody is rich does not mean that you are entitled to more of their money. The money that is earned by the wealthy person is just as valuable as the money earned by the person that works at Qdoba or Wendy's or Arby's. It's just economies of scale, and the government is not entitled to a greater share of it, regardless of the tax-ease situation.
So, sitting here listening to what you're saying, I agree with that.
Well, as you should.
So, the government likes to skim off monies that steal.
Yeah, larceny
from wealthy people. What do wealthy people do with their extra money? They try to invest it and make more money.
Sure.
They spend it on new homes,
new businesses
that need to be built.
Yep.
I don't know how many houses we built over the last 20 years for the ultra wealthy, and how many jobs that sustained. I would much rather see that money remain in the hands of the wealthy,
Absolutely.
where they're gonna invest it. They're gonna do with it what they will. Be much more productive than to turn it over to a bunch of bureaucrats.
And do you know why it is much more effective in the hands of the people that made it? Because when you put it in the hands of the government, you end up with flower pots.
When it's in the hands of the people that made it, they understand what it took to make.
Absolutely.
They respect it.
And if you want, if you want something to be done on budget, on time, and to have a good quality product, do not enlist the help of the government. Have a private individual do it, because they understand what it takes to make money. Similarly speaking, when it comes to the taxes that are stolen from you, why is it that we automatically think that it is the government's job to take care of the lesser, the poorer people? Why we should take care of the people who are lesser advantaged? We hear this all the time. We got to take care of the poor and the needy. Why is that the government's responsibility?
Well, they want to buy the votes.
Well, that's exactly what they're up to.
You're creating a dependent class.
Yes.
And we'll probably be talking about that a little bit today, I'm guessing.
Oh, here in just a minute or two. But it is not the government's role to take care of those people who, have a lower wage job than some other person. That's not the role of government. Now, it does say in the Wyoming Constitution, there is the phrase, except for necessary support for the poor. And there is a place for charity, a small amount of it. But when the government starts getting involved, it no longer becomes charity. It remains theft of your money, regardless of what the purpose is. That the government doesn't have its own money, and therefore any money that it has to come from somewhere else, namely you, the taxpayer. The only way that helping out a poor individual or the lesser advantaged individual, the only way that is charity is if it is done by a private party. That's the only way. It is impossible for government to create charity.
When government begins to dole stuff out, there's a fine line between a safety net and a hammock.
Yes.
and it's easy to take money from the government because you figure it's not really hurting anybody. Um,
It's somebody
it,
else's money.
yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of there's a lot of shades of meaning in that,
Mm.
and and I've been somebody who made some mistakes, was down and out for a time,
I think everybody
and
has.
and I remember the church effectively bailing me out, and I was so respectful of that because I know how hard those people worked for that money, and they gave it to me personally of their own free will. They handed me the money. That is much more than, well, you could just go down and file for this and you'll start getting checks from the government. Well,
When did
that's easy to do, and you don't really feel like you're stealing it from anybody.
Yeah,
Or
well,
taking
I mean,
somebody else's money.
historically in this country, Ken, charities were never run by the government. It was always run by the church.
Yep.
And other private individuals. I'm not saying that there wasn't a rich person that built an orphanage or something,
Yeah.
but it was always done by private parties and predominantly the church.
And when the government does it, then the church thinks, well, I don't have to do that.
Well,
and so they don't.
So in our church the other day, we had, well, I guess it's been a month now, but we were having a discussion of what causes should we support. And one of those that we have supported for a really long time was the food pantry. And I have no problem with the food pantry whatsoever. But we had this great discussion of, okay, so what is it that these people are going to get besides food? Is it a situation where you show up and you get your bag of food and that's it? Or is it you show up and you get your bag of food and we say, well, you know what, we need help raking the yard outside the church. Could we do that? Or, go sweep the sidewalk or something. Or is it, all right, we're going to talk about what this food means and why we're doing this. Is there something else to go along with it over and above just the act of handing a bag of food? That's the difference right there, is that you are required to do something in order to get something. And, in our church, it was, well, of course we'll help out. And we set up our own food box, and there's almost always something in it.
I was a member for a long time of a large Christian church in Colorado Springs, and every deacon that was appointed had a specific job, and mine was benevolent. So if somebody came to the church and said, "Hey, I need
Boy, they
help,"
picked the right person for that job, didn't
they did, and I would give them the help. First time was pretty much whatever you need, we'll take care of you. We didn't add, excuse me, we didn't add a lot of strings, but we developed a network of, say, widows and orphans type people who needed things, and say they come back again for more, and we're glad to do that for you, but we've got Mrs. Smith over here who broke her hip. She can't get out, and somebody needs to go mow her lawn.
Yeah.
Needs some of those things done. If you would go handle that, we'll be glad to.
Absolutely.
And almost never would the people do anything for it. There was church after church after church, and there were people who literally, that's how they made their living, was going from one church to the next and asking for a handout and receiving it. And then they go to another one, and by the time they made it through all the churches, it might be a year later, and somebody else is in charge, somebody else is there.
Right.
And that's all they did. So I created a network within the churches where we would let each other know, and we very
I just
quickly
helped out this folk.
Yeah,
this
we
person.
very quickly found out who these people were and identified them, and changed some things. So, and maybe I wasn't real well liked in that, but that's why I speak to the idea of, when does a safety net become a hammock?
Exactly.
And it's much easier to take money from a government entity than it is from an individual.
Because it's somebody else's money.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where I was going, is that when churches ceased to be, and private, I shouldn't just keep saying it's churches, because it's not. When private individuals and churches ceased to become the main source of charity, what happened? What did you see that happened in the population of the needy? Well, it exploded. Because it is somebody else's money.
Yeah, there's another aspect too, which you're probably going to get to, and I'm not trying to steal your thunder.
You
but
are you are on a roll doing that
you
today.
happen to be right in
A
the
lot.
middle of something that means a lot to me and has. Regardless of what you read in the papers, they'll try to tell you that I'm callous and I just don't
Yes.
care and I want people to starve. The other thing that we did as a church is we would look at somebody who was in a position where you keep coming, you need help. What's the root of the problem?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What is it that you're doing or not doing?
Let's get to the root of the problem and
Let's see if we
get
can
you
fix
back on
that.
your feet.
And often, and our church is one of the. I mean, there's a lot of things I love about our church, but it's such a diverse group of people that if somebody needs a job, more than likely there is somebody in the church that maybe they have a couple of odd jobs around their house and they'd be willing to pay, or maybe it's in the middle of winter, and one of our parishioners owns a big property that has a lot of sidewalks to shovel, but there's always something to do, and it's a very, very giving group of people, and absolutely, I mean, I don't know of anybody that would deny somebody in need, but there's also lots of opportunities there. If somebody does need something, you say, all right, hey, I know you're hard on your luck. Here's what I need that you can do, and I will pay you for it. See, that is how charity is supposed to work. But when we hand that role over to the government, it ends up being, like Ken said, a hammock. And one of those people who is absolutely in favor of a hammock is Gail Simmons. After the forum the other night, the legislative recap, whatever you want to call it, Gail Simmons posted this, and I quote, "Just one reason that of many that I oppose the Freedom Caucus are the individual claims of being Christian and touting their Christian values. When a pastor opposes the Sunbucks program and says that feeding children just encourages them to become a socialist, I have to wonder what parts of the New Testament that he actually reads. And then another repeatedly states that it is not the government's job to feed other people's children. So it is okay for children to go hungry when we could do something to help. And then, and this is interesting because I love it when leftists quote the Bible, because it usually ends up being the undoing of their argument. So Gail Simmons quotes Matthew 25:35, and this is one that liberal bleeding hearts use all of the time, and I, without pulling up, going out to the car and grabbing my Bible, this is what she says. The verse says, quote, "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in." Do you know what all of those things in that passage have in common, or that don't have in common? None of them involve government. It does not say Caesar gave me something to eat or Pontius Pilate gave me something to eat. It says you
Gave of your own volition,
yes,
of your own property, of your own things. The gifts that are given there are given out of my wealth. I don't go steal it from somebody else and then give them that money.
Yes.
That's what government does.
And it's fascinating to me that she uses a passage from the Bible that has absolutely nothing to do with government, and undermining her entire argument that's saying that government ought to be doing it. But there's another problem with what she said, and what she's referring to is when a pastor opposes the Sunbucks program and says that feeding children encourages them to become a socialist. Now, obviously, this is referring to our co-host, Agent 29. Ken, do you hate children? Do you hate feeding children?
Yeah. I thought that was obvious.
Oh, there's the sound bite for the day.
No, of course I don't. And as we've just described, I made that a part of my ministry for a long time, was trying to get people out of that position. I made a challenge which had probably never been done before. In fact, I was told it had never been challenged before during the legislative session, for a request for some funds, federal funding, to go to native tribes. And the numbers weren't adding up anyway. Long story short, they ended up getting the money that they actually needed, not an inflated amount.
Sure.
In the hearing where that was announced that they were going to get that, there's testimony from one of the tribal leaders saying, if we were not going to get this money, people would die.
Yes.
And as a pastor, as a preacher, that is utterly unacceptable. To have someone, and depend, that if I don't have the government here to give me a handout,
I'm going to die.
I'm going to die. Why is that permissible in any society?
It's not.
Especially America.
And it's I think that one example right there. And by the way, you were talking about the Select Committee on Tribal Relations, and before the end of the program we'll try to find which meeting that was, so you can go watch this for yourself. But the idea that without the government you cease to exist, you are going to die, that is shocking.
It's terrifying. That's what it is. What happens when the government changes? Governments are fickle. They fail.
You know, I have a hard time with people who tell me I can't find work. Well, then, quite frankly, you have not been looking. That if you want a job, there are jobs to be had. There's jobs everywhere to be had.
If somebody's disabled and cannot work,
that's different.
Then there is a place for that, and I actually helped increase about $10 million of funding for people in that position.
Now that's different. But if you're just the down on the luck guy, you lost your job or whatever for whatever reason, the saying that I cannot find work is absolutely an excuse. Now, it may not be the job that you want. It may not be the job that you're qualified for.
It might not even be totally sufficient for what you need.
But at least it is something, and you can find a job. You might be stocking shelves at Walmart. You might be late night at the grocery store stocking shelves.
If I take that job, I'll lose my government benefits.
There you go.
Well, I got to have a $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000 a year job to get off of welfare.
Isn't that the point?
Yeah.
That you can get off of that. And so anyway, the Gail Simmons and the whole point she's trying to make is, how dare you be unchristian? Well, turns out that voting against government subsidies is at its very core.
It is not Christian for me to steal your money and take it to give to somebody else.
Yes, it is not yours to give.
That is not Christian.
Now, let's talk about the governor. Yesterday, there was some big hubbub about the governor's executive order. And, I mean, we could probably talk for hours about the legitimacy of an executive issuing an order. The best way that I ever heard it described was by Representative Hageman, when she says, I can issue an executive order, and it only covers the people that work in my office. She says, I can tell them we are going to start every sentence with a capital letter, and that everybody that works under her will be required to begin every sentence with a capital letter. Similarly, when the president issues an executive order, that's not a law. That's everybody that works for him, or in other words, works in the executive branch, because the president is the chief executive. So when the chief executive says everybody is going to begin a sentence with a capital letter, everybody that works in the executive branch then has to comply with his order. Now, does that mean that Joe the plumber has to begin every sentence with a capital letter? Well, he should, but does it mean that he has to, according to what the president says? No. The president cannot write laws on his own. Now, we happen to think that creates a law, but it doesn't. The president can no more tell you to wear pink shoes than the state legislature can. Now, the state legislature can tell themselves what color of shoes to wear, but they can't tell you. And this is very similar to what the governor did yesterday. So reading from his email for immediate release, Governor Mark Gordon today signed an Executive Order 2026-02 regarding the federal summer nutrition program called Sunbucks. Now, I want you to listen to this very carefully because I'm reading from his email. Sunbucks announcing the state has been able to pull together the resources needed to ensure low-income children will receive much-needed meals throughout the summer months across Wyoming. As grocery prices rise, Wyoming families are struggling to put food on the table. The Sunbucks program was part of the Department of Family Services exception budget request during the legislative budget session, or it says during the recent budget session, but was not funded by the Wyoming legislature. Now, that paragraph leads you to believe that the exception request for the Department of Family Services was indeed to fund children, and you heartless conservatives decided not to fund it. How dare you make children starve? Is that actually what that exception request was for, or was it for something else? Let me read this to you. And this is don't mind the government speak, but let me read the whole paragraph to you. The explanation of request, the Summer Electronic Benefits Transfer, also known as Sunbucks, is a federally funded program that provides grocery benefits to eligible school-aged children. All right, sounds like we're on par with what the governor said during the summer months when school meals are not available. Now, we can argue, we could talk for hours, and we probably don't need to, but why it's the school's job to provide meals during the summer, why it's the duty of the taxpayer to do that.
Alan, I would also say there are a lot of programs out there that provide food for folks.
Yes, but this is not one of them.
Right.
And I quote, Sunbucks has a cost-sharing requirement of a 50% federal funding and 50% state funding for $1.6 million. Of the total request is listen to this, is a one-time startup expense to primarily fund the eligibility IT system, so for a computer system. The remaining cost, $1.9 million, reflects the request of one full-time program manager and administrative costs, such as IT to operate the program, and is an ongoing request. And you could look at the table there, but this doesn't have anything to do with food.
And it's $1.75 million, and you haven't fed a single person yet.
Yes. None of that has
that
anything to do with feeding
itself,
kids.
If it were to go buy food and somebody volunteered to distribute it or whatever and set that up, no, we have to spend almost $2 million just to set up the system before anybody's gotten the spoonful.
Yes. So none of that budget request had anything to do with food. And yet the governor sent out a statewide email yesterday that claims that that's exactly what it did. And if you read into it, he doesn't actually make the claim, but he leads you to believe that that's what that money was for, and that the legislature heartlessly refused to fund it.
But the legislature, that's our job. Our job is to decide what programs there and then to fund the same. This went through the legislature refused. The executive's job is to execute the laws, hence the term executive. The laws that we write.
The legislature said no.
So when you go and you look at his veto messages, they point a lot of fingers at saying, hey, you people over there, you stay in your own lane. You don't come over here and tell us how many people we have to hire and all those other things. That's executive power. And we dare not encroach or touch on that. But if you don't do your job the way that I think you should do your job, I'm going to circumvent you. And then when you come back in session, you're stuck with one of two things. You're either going to deny it and admit that,
it's already spent,
that you're taking food out of the mouths of babes, or you're going to do what you refused to do before and fund yet one more expansion of the welfare program. And it is a repetitious program. There are already people out there feeding anybody that needs it, and they get it from places like churches where they might actually get some meaningful help.
You know, a really good example of this is and not all food pantries are like this, but a great example is the one in Buffalo. Now, there has never been a time, I used to live in an apartment building that was right behind the food pantry. And, I'd walk downtown, the theater was right across the street, and it was roughly a block and a half from downtown. But there's never really a time where I saw that place empty. Quite the reverse, actually. That there were a lot of people that donated to the food pantry. There were a lot of hunters that come from out of state, and they, while many people in Wyoming bristle at this notion, but they were only interested in the rack of antlers that they could find. But they didn't want that food to go to waste, and so they would leave the rest of the animal at the locker plant and then, pay for it, of course. And then the locker plant would package it up and give it to the food pantry. And the truth is, in the winter months, if you wanted, if you were cooking something and you wanted some wild game, you could go to the food pantry. And what I did is I'd say, hey, I'm looking for some deer burger or elk burger or something, and I'd hand them $10 for a pound of burgers. And so, but that's the way that it ought to work. That it's a private endeavor which people donate their hard-earned money to, and the government is not involved. Now, that was 10 years ago, but it may very well be that the city council says, you know what, we're going to, and in Sheridan, I'm sure this would happen because they give away our money all the time, but we're going to give a certain amount of cash to the food pantry. First, that's not their job to do that, and generally speaking, people are charitable in and of themselves. Most people are, and I don't know of a single person, perhaps outside of Agent 29, that would refuse to do that.
People tend to be more charitable when they have more cash.
Yeah.
And so if we tax them at every turn, they've got less money to be charitable with. Plus, they have the excuse, well, I've already paid my taxes, and the government's supposed to do that. So we end up with this heartless, careless, everything else less.
Well, and I think the end of this is Governor Gordon stopped lying. That budget exception request had nothing to do with feeding kids, which is why the legislature said no. And you shouldn't lead Wyoming citizens to believe that that's actually what happened. Now, I'll be fascinated to read the article in the Cowboy. I'm sure that there's one coming. And we'll, on tomorrow's program, I'll tell you what they had to say about it. But that exception request had nothing to do with food, and the governor shouldn't be saying that it did. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Cynthia Lummis and Ted Cruz. And why the heck are we talking about climate change? Back in a minute. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Hunting season. Right about now, you're off with all of your pals, stalking the big gigantic elk or buck mule deer that you've been thinking about all summer long. And your lovely wife is at home, probably enjoying her time without you. But soon, my friend, all of that is going to come to a screeching halt. And I want you to think about just one little thing. She's able to park her car inside the garage because all of your hunting crap is with you right now. Now, if you'd like the marital bliss to continue, I suggest you make a call to Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They can build you a garage or a barn or any other type of metal structure for you to store all of your toys in so that your wife can continue parking inside the garage. And you can avoid sleeping on the couch for the next month or two. Call Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Get them to build you a metal building before it's too late. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. It's Thursday. I'm David Iverson, doing what I love to do each and every day with talent given to me by the great Almighty himself. And, you know, we should all be thankful for the gifts that we're given. Everybody's got one. And if you haven't found out what yours is yet, maybe ask him and he'll let you know.
Have to wait till Christmas.
That's not the type of gift we're talking about, Ken. No. Well, thank you for watching the program. I really appreciate it. Thanks for everything you do. Make sure that you share the program with all of your friends and pals. You don't want them to miss out on being pointed out that the governor is lying a lot. At least he was in his email yesterday. By the way, as it relates to that whole conversation, we've got some more coordinates for you where you can find that quotation, or, you know, what Ken was talking about with the Select Committee on Tribal Relations.
If we didn't get this money, we would die.
Yeah, that one. It's either in the January 27th or January 28th meeting. It's one of those. And you could, usually what I do is I scan through the video and wait for, you know, I'm generally looking for a comment from somebody. And so I'll just scan through until I see him talking. And then, okay. But you ought to be able to find it pretty quickly. January 27th, January 28th. Now, at the top of the hour, there is a bizarre story coming out of Goshen County, their school district there. They censured themselves. I don't even know where to begin. I've got some videos for you that we're going to play. And Representative Scott Smith is going to call into the program at the top of the hour, and he'll have some other folks with him, and so we're gonna talk about the lunacy that happened down there.
And I will admit, because I always worry about this, it's kind of experimental technology, so
all of this
we'll make it work one way or another. But
yeah, well, anyway, we'll do that at the top of the hour. But there is a piece in the Cow Pie. Actually, there's several in the Cow Pie today, but this one is entitled, Lummis says Congress should set major climate change rules and not the EPA. There's so much that I have to say on this. Beginning with the opening paragraph, and I quote, Wyoming Senator Cynthia Lummis has teamed up with Texas Republican Ted Cruz to defend the EPA's about-face on Obama-era climate change regulations on greenhouse gas emissions. Let Congress make those decisions, they argue. Wyoming's senator, let's see here, they argued that the agency was right to deregulate itself, and regulation of that magnitude should be left to Congress. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency decided in February that it had gone too far in 2009 when it declared certain greenhouse gases a public health threat in what is known as the endangerment finding. 17 health and environmentalist groups asked Washington, D.C.-based federal appeals court to consider the agency's about-face was merely random, spontaneous, or in legal speak, arbitrary and capricious. The groups asked questions of the court, such as whether the agency is correct in concluding that its years-long war on greenhouse gases had so little impact on the environment that it was futile, or whether the scaling back of agency authority was itself a violation of administrative law, or, and that's funny, administrative law. Okay, rules and regulations are not laws. And Ken, maybe you could shed some light on this too, but when a bill says the agency shall promulgate rules, does that have the force of law? Yes, but does that make that rule a law? Not necessarily, and there's another story in the stack.
Yeah, because the rule can be changed without action on the part of the legislature.
There you go. That's the part that makes it not really a law. And whether the agency's change failed to explain why it would depart from long-standing agency practice. And then the final thing I'll read to you, and then have some comments afterwards. Repealing the endangerment finding endangers all of us, they say. People everywhere will face more pollution, higher costs, and thousands of avoidable deaths. So says the Environmental Defense Fund in February. Well, this presumes that, in fact, the greenhouse gases they're referring to, such as CO2, are actually pollutants. Last time I checked, in order for plants to grow, in order for trees to grow, they need this so-called dangerous and life-threatening gas called CO2. Now, of course, any gas in high concentrations would probably, except for oxygen, maybe oxygen would do that too. But they're not going to kill you. I mean, CO2 is. And I suppose if it gets into a high enough concentration, the exhaust off of a car or whatever, but it's everything in moderation. And there isn't a plant on this planet that can exist without oxygen and without CO2. I mean, you can say expel oxygen. But the point here is the whole thing is ridiculous. But I have a more fundamental question. Why are we making rules about greenhouse gases anyway, and specifically about climate change? Now, I personally think that climate change is probably a fact. That yes, indeed, the climate does change, just not in the time frame that all of these hoaxsters think it does.
Yeah, or what causes it to change.
Yeah, I mean it's all presumptuous, and to allow an agency to make up rules that are not laws. And generally speaking, these rules are not made by people who are, educated in that area. They're made by bureaucrats. So one bureaucrat says, I think we should have a level of CO2 that's this high. But generally speaking, there isn't a lot of science that goes behind it. But why is it that we have to have rules surrounding climate change anyway? Because that rests on the presumption that climate change is a thing, and it's really not. However, I think that Congress taking back the authority to create these rules is absolutely a good thing. That unelected bureaucrats should not be the ones that are creating rules that you have to follow. Rules that, yes, do have the force of law, but if you're not accountable to voters, you shouldn't be creating rules. And secondly, those rules aren't laws anyway, because as Agent 29 said, they can be changed on a whim. So anyway, I think this is actually a good thing, though. Again, I question whether or not we should be making rules on that at all. Oh, I guess I should close that website so it'll stop making noise. All right. So anyway, there's that one. And then we have good old Mike Yin. Mike Yin talking about Republicans. So there's a guest column in the Cowboy, and it's entitled, Wyoming Voters Get to Decide Who Represents Wyoming and Nobody Else. Well, if never a truer thing was said out of the mouth of a Democrat. Yes, Wyoming voters do get to choose who represent them. And by the way, Ken, while I go through this piece, would you hook up the phones for me? But anyway, here's what Mike Yin says.
You know what Mike Yin needs? I was just thinking,
a swift kick.
He needs a compatriot called Yang. Somebody to balance him out a little bit.
He does. He's entirely unbalanced, as you will find out in just a second. Quote, Wyoming belongs to the people who live here. Yeah, that's true. The people who fix fences, plow their neighbors' driveways, and sit next to whomever shows up at the potluck. The people who ask a pretty simple question during election season, who's going to do the best job for my community? You see, all of this, a lot of the beginning of this op-ed are all truisms, that none of it is really persuasive at all. It's all things that are true. Who gets to choose who represents you? Well, that's you, the voters. You every other year and every 4 years, we go to the polls and we decide who we think is going to be the best person to send to Cheyenne or to Washington, D.C. But here's where he kind of goes off the rails. That question used to be the most of what the election was about. You knew the candidate or you knew someone who did. You'd seen them at the fair, the school board meeting, or a funeral. You decided whether you trusted them with a piece of your community's future, and you vote accordingly. The party label was on the ballot, but it wasn't doing most of the work. The person was. And he says, lately, a small group of people has decided that they should do that work for you. Now, the question is, does the Democrat Party and does the Republican Party always do that? Is that not their primary purpose? And that is to elect people who are members of that party. The main job of the Republican Party is to get Republicans elected to office. The main job of the Democrat Party is to get Democrats elected to office. And so during election season, the reason why we have campaign signs and we have party meetings and we have big fundraisers, and the party has a headquarters in town where you can go and get all of your campaign propaganda. That's their job. But Mike Yen wants to say that it is the Wyoming Freedom Caucus that is making that decision. Let's see what he says. Quote, there are social media pages run by a handful of Wyoming Freedom Caucus legislators and their allies, whose entire I wouldn't know who he would be referring to there. I'm sure I'm not in that group. And their allies, whose entire purpose it is to tell you which of your neighbors don't measure up. Last week, one of them pointed to a congressional primary in another state to make the case that some of your sitting Republican officials don't really count as Republicans. Now, it absolutely is the job of political parties and caucuses and political political advisors is what I'm saying. It is their job to help inform you and persuade you as to who you should vote for. That's their intended purpose. And by the way, Mike Yen, there are a slew of Democrat Party aligned web pages that are devoted to the exact same thing.
Yeah, we call them the press.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. But there are several billboards, even around Sheridan. One of them is called Frontier Stand, whoever the heck they are. On social media, Gail Simmons is also always posting something from Wyoming Grit, obviously Democrat-aligned outfits. And what is their purpose? To not elect conservatives. You see, this is the entire reason why we have an election, to find out who has the best ideas and who can convince the most people to vote for them. That's the whole purpose behind an election, so that whichever side the voter is most persuaded by, that's the person they go into the booth and vote for. So this sentence here, last week, one of them pointed to a congressional primary in another state to make the case that some of your Republican officials don't really count as Republicans. He's referring to the article in the Open Range Record about the court ruling in Ohio, the one where the Supreme Court denied to overturn their Secretary of State's ruling that this guy is not a Republican. Because, Mike, he said he wasn't. And when your rhetoric does not align with the political party that you say that you represent, that's called fraud. Now, again, fraud, that's a criminal offense, but that's essentially what it is. You're lying to people to get elected. Now, Mike, you and I have had a very similar conversation about people who are actually Democrats that register as Republicans in order to monkey around with the Republican primary. You and I have had that discussion, Mike. And so don't act like this isn't actually a thing. Democrats do the exact same thing.
Well, Carly's out there advocating for it right now.
Oh, no, that can't be. That couldn't be that she's asking Democrats to register as Republicans. Well, the truth is they all do that, including Gail Simmons, Mike Yen. And, again, this whole thing is so disingenuous that, you can, I can almost see him like reading this thing aloud with that little wry smile that he's always got on his face. Let's see here. Another has built a scoreboard tracking how each Republican legislator voted the same way as a Democrat, as if a Republican and Democrat who voted together to fix a road in Wyoming has failed some kind of test. That's not what we're referring to. Every time I show you evidence-based Wyoming, it's not the people that are right on the margin that I'm referring to. It's the folks that register as Republicans, that tell their constituents that they are indeed Republicans, and then they go to Cheyenne and they side with you most of the time. And I wouldn't want to mention any names, Marilyn Connolly, or Bo Beitman that sided with the Democrats around 43% of the time, or Bob Nicholas, or Lloyd Larson, or K.O. Case. Hey, we have not talked about K.O. Case yet.
So it's you got people that vote to increase spending for 240 out of 250 budget amendments.
Yeah.
And then want to come home and say I'm fiscally conservative.
Well, and that's exactly my point. And this is the thing that irritates me the most is, and this is honestly, this is one of the main reasons that I even started Cowboy State Politics, was that these folks would campaign and say, tell me how conservative they are. And then I would look at their voting record, and it would be exactly the opposite of the way that they told me that they were going to vote.
My predecessor was king of that. He'd come back and, yay, isn't it great to be a Republican? And go down there and vote against the platform 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah, exactly right. And a lot of them do that. What Mike Yin is irritated about now is by exposing these folks who are absolutely redcoats, it decreases the amount of power that the Democrat Party has in the Wyoming legislature. Now, the media would lead you to believe that the Democrats, well, there's only 6 of them in the House and there's only 2 of them in the Senate. So how could they possibly have that much power? Well, it's because they saddle up with the liberal Republicans, the redcoats that are already elected, and they get them to do their bidding. And, I mean, when you're voting with the Democrats over 80% of the time, like Eric Barlow or many others, absolutely the Democrats have an outsized amount of power in the legislature. And what Mike Yin is really whining about is that all of that is being exposed. And you can go look up the votes yourself at the town hall on Tuesday. Some of that went on. A couple constituents stood up and said, we want to know why you voted against House Bill 10, the pornography in libraries bill. And of course, none of them really got a straight answer, but at least they were confronted by their constituents and said, look, explain yourself. We think this is a big problem, and you voted against it. So explain why. And that's the way that it's supposed to work. Mike Yin is just irritated that it's being exposed, and he can watch his influence in the legislature decrease on a daily basis. And frankly, Mike, I really hope that we continually decrease the influence that you have, namely that we replace a lot of your redcoat compatriots in both the House and the Senate. And I'm very optimistic that that's going to happen. I mean, I think that it probably will. Another guy, and if you want any proof of this, Ken, would you let's see here. Let's see if I can. I don't know if I can or not. Nope. Hold on. All right. So anyway, one of the recent controversies that's been brewing is that Kale Case has a website called Case for Senate, and the guy that is running it, his name is Bruce Palmer. His email address is bruce@turnedfremontblue.com. Now, that sounds like an awfully Republican fellow to me, doesn't it to you, Agent 29?
Either that or they're going to take away all of our oxygen.
Yeah, here we go. So here is Case for Senate, and if you sign up for his mailing list, and he's probably caught on by this point, but it is run by this guy named Bruce Palmer, he absolutely is an activist for the Democrat Party. So why is Kale Case, a registered Republican, hooking up with a Democrat for his Senate campaign? Well, I mean, probably one reason is he didn't think that you would notice. Second, he probably thought that Bruce would be smart enough not to put his real email address on there. And third, he's really been a redcoat for a really long time. So maybe he thinks that nobody is under any illusion whatsoever that he is who he actually says he is. So anyway, my friends, that's what Mike Yin is up to. He's just irritated that his influence is waning. All right, so we're a little bit early, but we're going to go ahead and take our second break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about this whole Goshen County thing. Wow, you're not going to believe this. Crazy, my friends. I know. The weather seems to be toying with us. 60 one day, 42 the next, and pretty soon, my friends, those 6s and 4s are going to turn into 3s and 2s. Though we all want to avoid it, that white stuff is coming, my friends, and you will be shoveling the walk in it. It's cold, it's unpleasant, and nobody likes to do it. But you could make it just a little bit more comfortable and prevent your feet from turning into a giant block of ice. In fact, you could keep them nice and warm and toasty, and your toes will never even know that they're outside. The rest of you may be frozen solid, but at least your feet won't be. To make all this happen, you just need a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Way better produced, way better manned, way better content, way more informed, and just all around better than all of the other programs that claim to tell you about news. Thank you for watching Cowboy State Politics. I'm your host, David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time, which is why I think, Agent 29, that people like Dennis Beitman feel the need to talk about the show, when they're in public. I mean, I have to tell you, Ken, that gives me an immense amount of pleasure just listening to these people. I think it's necessary to give me some advertisement. But, none of them realize that every time they mention my show, it is, I just chalk it up to, well, yeah, there's an ad I didn't have to pay for. Yep, there's a Facebook post I didn't have to do. Well, anyway, my friends, welcome to the program. So there is some really crazy stuff going on down in Goshen County. And, I've got on the phone Scott Smith, Bob Peterson, Chris Alexander, and they're all going to talk about this this craziness that's been happening down in Goshen County. So, Scott, how's it going, my friend? What's happening?
Hey, David and Kim, it's good to be here, and lots of interesting things going on in Goshen County, but I was kind of surprised, and I don't know if it's ever been done at, I don't know, statewide or what, but an entire school board censured the entire school board.
Well, of course that hasn't happened because it's stupid.
So I thought, well, you might be interested to learn about that. So.
Well, I think there's a lot to talk about there. And so who do you got on the phone with you, Scott?
So I have Bob Peterson, who served previously on the school board and is one of our Patriot Fighter individuals that just cares about children and wants to hold the school board accountable. And then I have one of our other Patriot conservative school board members, Chris Alexander, and I believe they love him so much. This is the third attempt to censure him personally, and this was the first successful censure of him. So.
Wow. Okay. Well, all of this started over a complaint to the Wyoming Bar Association. And Ken, if you could just show everybody what I'm talking about. So this is a picture of that censure from Mr. Peterson, and I'll just read it to you. It says, Lena Moeller is also the board chairperson of the Goshen County School Board, and she is not the legal counsel for Goshen County School District number 1. Enclosed are emails showing her law office business phone number and her logo. Being an attorney, it seems to imply more than her elected position as a board member, and using her legal name seems unnecessary for conducting school business. Misleading or an error in judgment, it seems to be more unethical for a practicing attorney. Please find the enclosed examples of her legal office emails to board members and other individuals. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Robert Peterson. And let me just see if I got this right, Bob. But so you submitted this complaint to the Wyoming Bar. Then what happened?
Well, okay, initially not much. A response back from the Bar Association saying that they didn't find sufficient evidence. But then what happened at the school board meeting on Tuesday night, they stated that there was all kinds of, how would you say it, emails that violated open meeting law or shared private emails. And there was 60 pages of the emails. Yeah, and so I wanted to provide as much information as I could to them. Well, they blew up. I was verbally assaulted by 4 board members at the meeting.
Wow.
Scott Smith was also verbally assaulted. The other individuals, well, Scott Smith was one, and he's our House rep. And then the other one is Shane Victorin, who is a city council member. Basically, it just blew up clear out of proportion. I'm not to go into more details because there's other avenues I will be pursuing.
Sure. All right, so I've got a little snippet of that video, and it's actually not little; it's kind of long. But we'll go ahead and watch it. Ken, it's called the Goshen Censure, and you guys ought to be able to hear this.
Okay.
Next is consider censure of board for violation of board leadership governance. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have a
Listen to this.
prepared
This
statement
is crazy.
to explain what this is about. Censuring is a serious action taken against a member of a governing board, and it is not something that we should ever consider taking lightly. As a board, we initially attempted to address this matter internally. However, I am disappointed to say that a member of this board shared emails containing confidential information with a member of the public, Bob Peterson. In doing so, that individual not only violated our board governance, specifically policy 1.5.12, which requires us to keep confidential matters confidential, but also violated Wyoming Statute 9-13-105, which prohibits the dissemination of non-public information obtained through one's role as a public official. Further, the dissemination of these emails enabled Mr. Peterson to file a formal complaint with the Wyoming Bar Association against Chairwoman Moeller. It is my understanding that this action was undertaken with malice and vindictiveness, and with the apparent intent to cause personal harm to Chair Moeller, rather than to address any legitimate concern. The Wyoming Bar Association reviewed the complaint and dismissed it without consideration as it lacked merit. This situation is deeply concerning, not only because of the breach of confidentiality, but because it represents a misuse of information that had nothing to do with the work of this board. The complaint filed was unrelated to school board governance and serves as an example of how these types of actions distract from the important work that we are elected to do. As board members, we are held to a higher standard. Our constituents not only expect that of us, but they demand it. Integrity, accountability, and trust are foundational to effective governance, and when those are compromised, it is our responsibility to respond in a way that reflects the seriousness of the breach. At our last meeting, we made a good faith effort to address this issue internally and to provide an opportunity for the party responsible to come forward. Unfortunately, that did not occur.
Okay, pause.
Because of we are
Okay, so I mean, this whole thing is bizarre, and we'll get back to it here in just a second. But really, what she just said is we attempted to figure out who the whistleblower was, but that whistleblower did not come forward, and now we're going to take our anger out on everybody. And what is a censure? A censure is a political action. So in Robert's Rules of Order, which allegedly all of our deliberative bodies, city council, county commissioners, school boards, whatever, pretty much everything except the legislature works off of Robert's Rules. And a censure is about the only disciplinary action that a board, elected or otherwise, could take against its member, and a member of the board. And I just typed in what is a censure into Google, and here's what it says. Censure refers to the official, formal expression of strong disapproval, condemnation, or harsh criticism, often in a political or professional context. It is used to reprimand individuals for misconduct, such as a legislative body rebuking one of its members without removing them from office. Okay, so really, it's a political maneuver that members of the board decide to do against one of their members. Hey, we don't like how you handle the situation. A good example of that, I think, is years ago, the Wyoming Republican Party censured a state committee woman, Joanne True, for setting up a political action committee that donated to Democrats. So a sitting member of the governing body of the Wyoming Republican Party was raising money for Democrats, the exact opposite of what she should be doing. And so the Republican Party censured her. So literally what it is a official, by official, I don't mean legal, but an official act of the body, whichever body it is, that slaps the hand of one of the members. No, bad board member is essentially what it is. Now, the only other available disciplinary action that a board could take is to remove a member. And you, in any of these boards, you can remove a member if you got 2/3 of the votes. But the problem is that, and this is why there are two reasons why the Goshen County School District didn't do this. One, the whistleblower didn't come forward. And two, removing a member is politically, let's just say perilous. Politically perilous to try to remove one of your fellow members.
It's a landmine.
It's a landmine. So, fellas, before I continue with the video, do I pretty much have this whole thing right up till this point?
You sure do.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Let's go ahead and watch the rest of the video because it gets crazier.
Board as a whole. I recognize that this is an unconventional approach.
It sure
However,
is.
I believe it is necessary. We owe it to our community to acknowledge that a breach occurred, to make that acknowledgement part of public record, and to demonstrate that we take our responsibilities seriously. Censuring the board as a whole ensures transparency and affirms that as a governing board, we do not ignore actions that undermine public trust. While this action reflects the conduct of one, it also reflects our collective responsibility to uphold the standards of this board. When one of us fails to do so and refuses to take accountability, it becomes the responsibility of the board to act. Actions such as these, both the breach of confidentiality and the subsequent filing of a frivolous complaint, are distractions from the meaningful, honest work we are here to do. As a board, we must reject this type of behavior, both internally and from external influences, and remain focused on serving our students, staff, and community. Therefore, it is my recommendation that we formally censure the board for the actions that have occurred in the interest of transparency, accountability, and maintaining the trust of the community that we serve.
Okay, pause for a minute. There's one more piece of this that we got to listen to. But so a censure resolution is not something you can do to yourself. I mean, it's like, I don't know, grabbing a horsewhip and whipping yourself. I mean, generally speaking, people don't do that. But the bizarre part of this is they're trying to punish everybody, and hopefully, in doing so, whomever is responsible for this is going to feel their wrath. So, a question for you, I guess Bob or Scott or Chris or whomever's got the answer here. So, was there actually legally confidential stuff in those emails? That's a part I didn't really get in this whole thing.
Chris could probably answer it better, but no, there wasn't. And they were all public emails because it's all public record on the school board.
Okay,
and Chris can probably.
Okay, Chris, go for it.
From what I've seen, and I haven't seen all of the emails.
Okay.
But what I have seen, I didn't see anything that showed anything that was confidential, in my opinion. It was between all board members, which I believe our school board emails are public information.
Yes, they are.
So anybody could probably FOIA all of those emails.
Okay.
If they so desire to see exactly what the school board is talking about.
Okay, so not to interrupt you for a minute, Chris, but just one quick question.
Yep.
How were these emails obtained? Was it somebody on the board who shall remain nameless that forwarded these emails on, or was it a FOIA request, or how did you come into possession of these emails?
From what I can tell, is a person or persons on the board did share some of the emails. Some of them, it seemed like to me by looking at them, came from the public.
So it was emails from the board.
I will admit.
Pardon me?
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I'll jump in. So, like, Bob Peterson did ask me if I've ever received any emails from Lena Mueller and if she used her legal letterhead on those emails. And especially during session, there were a ton of emails that I received saying, don't support recalibration, and here's the detriment, all these things that are going to happen to our school district. And so I willingly forwarded those on to Bob because I do believe in honesty and transparency. And even though mine aren't FOIA-able, I forwarded them on to Bob. And so that's another reason that Ms. Mueller and the board are mad at me, and and I got thrown into it.
Well, and what they're trying to protect is, their own political advocacy. They're trying to protect the chairman, who the reason why that letterhead is on there is to try to provide more gravitas to the emails. Look at me, I'm a lawyer. Let's go ahead and listen to the rest of that one video because there's a great piece right at the end of it. Go ahead and hit play, Ken.
Transparency, accountability, and maintaining the trust of the community that we serve.
Transparency. We're mad that all happened. Maybe that was the end of it. Okay, so that's all right because I've got another video. But here's the funny point about all this, guys, is they're screaming about, well, we're going to censure ourselves, which is beyond stupid, but we're going to censure ourselves because that's transparency for the public. Do you think that that's transparency, guys?
No.
Well, they've gone into numerous executive sessions about the issue, and one night for the executive session, I spent hours sitting in the boardroom doing nothing but twiddling my thumbs and talking to the rest of the community, and that doesn't seem very transparent to me.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, school boards across the country, and this is another example of, where people say that doesn't happen in Wyoming. But across the country, school boards have been trying to lash out at parents, their constituents, anybody really that exposes what they're doing. And, we expect our elected officials to, act with propriety, to be above reproach, to not try to hide things from their constituents. And one of those is, this Mueller woman trying to get you, Scott, to vote against recalibration. Why do you suppose she would do that?
She wants more money for the school districts.
Yep.
And this particular board meeting was interesting as well, because earlier in the meeting, during recalibration, they said how awful the state insurance is, and they took a vote to join the state insurance plan.
That they're punishing themselves. See?
Yes, self-flagellation.
That's what that's about.
All right, guys. So I got one more piece of video, and this, I think, exposes what the real purpose behind all of this is. And what you're going to see now are comments from this the board chairwoman, Moeller, and really all it is moralizing about this. But go ahead and hit play.
My thoughts are going to be kind of redundant after Trustee Steinbach's statement, but I think it's important that I go ahead with them. So this Board of Trustees, as well as the public that we serve, expect every member of this board to act with integrity, exercise sound judgment, and protect confidential information. These are not optional standards. They are fundamental responsibilities of this role. Trust was violated when confidential board email communications were shared with members of the public without authorization. This was a serious breach of duty. It undermines the board's ability to have honest discussions, damages working relationships, and puts the district at unnecessary risk. This conduct has real consequences for our district. Unauthorized disclosure of internal communications can compromise personnel matters, expose sensitive student or legal information, weaken the district's legal position, and erode public confidence in the board's ability to govern responsibly. It also creates confusion and misinformation in the community when partial or out of context information is shared. Transparency and confidentiality are not in conflict. They serve different and equally important purposes. This board is committed to transparency through open meetings, public records, and clear communication with the community.
So wait a minute. The board is committed to transparency and letting everybody know. I mean, guys, this is a perfect example of a board trying to protect itself. Now, I'd like to know what else is in those emails that they're so irritated about, because it can't just be that some of our emails got other. I mean, was there any other incriminating stuff in there, or is it just the legal stuff from the chairwoman?
Wasn't anything incriminating. Go ahead, Chris.
That was vice chair that was speaking there.
Okay. So was there anything else in there that they might find embarrassing?
No, nothing that had not been released to the public. There was one of the board members had asked about how an attorney was retained for a teacher. And he said, well, can we share that name now? This was at a public meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And the chairman, of course, said, oh, sure, yeah, you can let people know about this name. And it was one of the emails, and the section identifying the teacher was blacked out. So there was no mention of the teacher at all.
So they redacted it anyway.
Right.
Wow. Okay, guys. Well, I appreciate you joining the program. This is a crazy situation, and let me know if there's any other developments. I'm sure you'll probably get a little static of coming on this show, but that's all right, though. I mean, they're all interested in transparency, so I see no reason why we shouldn't give it to them. I appreciate it, guys.
This show has no static.
David, one other quick point I found fascinating is at the very end, two of the trustees that voted for it talked about how they weren't going to vote for it because it was silly, and then they voted for it. And then Dylan Hager had a major blow up about overhearing one of my prayers with several of our conservative Christian board members prior to the previous meeting. And basically I just said, Lord, please continue to expose the darkness. And he took personal offense to that darkness is being exposed. And yeah. And many other board members gasped when he even said that out loud. And so I just encourage the audience to look at the last 20 minutes of the Goshen County School District meeting from, is it the 14th? And you can find a lot of great information there.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and make sure that board meeting video is made available. Guys, appreciate you joining the program and taking some time. All right. So, Ken, when we talk about transparency, what does that mean, really? Does it mean that you try to hide everything from your constituents?
I hate questions like that.
I know.
Because I always want to go to the dark side instead of straight up.
No, we can't pray to get rid of the darkness.
Of course not. You take something like a school board, and it would be ideal if they were not even permitted to have an executive session. But in fact, they do deal with sensitive information at times, and it has to be there. We do the same thing. You know, I think we had at least 2 executive sessions for appropriations. And why is that? Well, when you get into the meeting, you figure out what it's in there, and okay, I get why that really shouldn't get out to the public. But that's part of a republic. That we're set up there to represent, and when that is abused, then it's time to reconsider who's there.
Well, and as it relates to executive sessions, there's only 2 reasons really that that a board, any board, whether it's the city council or the school board or whatever, can have an executive session. And you still got that video up? Because there's a piece in there.
I just closed it, but I can bring it back.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to go back to it here in just a second. But there's only a couple of reasons that you can go into executive session, and one of those is for legal matters, so lawsuit or whatever. And then the other one is a personnel matter. And I suppose, and I don't suppose, I know, with the school board, if you're dealing with a student and it is, a sensitive matter. But that would probably be a legal matter, or it could be a personnel matter. Now, that's one of the reasons why that whole Megan Degenfelder release of records was so terrible, because in those records was some highly sensitive stuff, children's names, dates of birth, really, really, really horrible
descriptions
stuff.
Of
really bad,
unspeakable things.
Yeah, I mean, just really terrible. But in this case, obviously, those records were already redacted. So whatever confidentiality was there had been removed. And if there isn't a legal or personnel matter in them, they're absolutely public records. Well, the reason why the Goshen County School Board was so incensed by this is how dare the public get to know what we're talking about? How dare one of our own thought that what we were doing was so wrong? And then they try to move to go after the whistleblower and force that person, whomever it was, to out themselves. I mean, this is a classic case of, oops, we got caught, and now we're going to feign our outrage and censure. It's not censor, it's censure ourselves. Absolutely ridiculous.
I kept having the picture during this discussion of the priest walking around with the little shaker censure. And then you got into the part where they're flogging themselves, and I saw, the little monks walking around with the whips.
Yeah, it's just stupid.
The pictures that show up. So I do have that video back up. I don't know where you might want to be.
So let's just go ahead and hit play, and we'll listen to a little bit more of it, because there's a really funny part in it.
Okay, well, so it restarted, so I'm going to move it up about in here.
Let's see here. Now there's a phone call in there. All right, go ahead and hit play. Let's see where we're at.
Here, one or more board members made a conscious decision to
Yeah, this is good. Let her play.
Not a confidential email, multiple confidential emails with a member of the public, while the majority of this board is diligently working on the business of this district towards the goal that we should all be focused on, which is our students. I am optimistic that as a board, we will be able to do that work and quit wasting so very much time on the outside political mechanisms of people whose goals I genuinely do not understand, but am confident in saying that they are not what is best for the students and the staff of our district. The trustee who shared the emails opted not to confess, which is why it is being taken as an umbrella censorship. And I am only in favor of this action because it is the only action that we have available. And I really strongly feel that action needs to be taken due to the seriousness of this issue.
Oh, yeah. Wait for it.
Any other discussion?
I'll make mine super quick. I'm really not in favor of censoring the whole board. Specifically, I'd be in favor of it if we could add a couple members of the public to the censure. So I'm
just
not
censor
really
the
in
whole
favor of
county.
it. I think it's just a waste of time.
That's
I'll
right.
explain a little bit more of that in our next
All
segment.
right. That's good enough. But this whole thing is just stupid. Boards don't censure themselves, and even if they do, it's entirely a political matter. It's just those people expressing their displeasure with what they're doing being exposed to the public. And the truth is that if you're a public official, and most people don't know this. Here's an interesting thing about being on a board. If you use your personal email for board business and something happens in that board, maybe there's a lawsuit or something, guess what happens? Your personal email is now part of discovery because it's all, and if it's FOIA'd, absolutely those things are up for grabs. So, we need to move away from this idea that because you're an elected official, there's somehow this presumption of privacy when in reality there isn't. You're paid by the public, you work for the public, you're the public's representative. Guess what? What you do for them, they should absolutely be privy to.
It's kind of sobering because I've actually had many old Facebook posts all of a sudden pop back up in the press.
Yeah, weird, huh?
Yeah. And, at the time you did that, furthest thing from your mind that it's going to come out in the press. And that's, public figure ain't necessarily all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah, not always fun. Sometimes it is. So let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, there's an op-ed by our state auditor, Christy Racinas, about so-called affordable housing. So we're going to talk about that coming up. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout and a coffee break for me. Back in a minute. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. It's Thursday on Cowboy State Politics Live, doing much better work than everybody else in the Wyoming media. Let's be honest, their program is kind of boring, and ours is
If you're doing any work, you've got about half of them beat.
Yeah, well, this is true.
A lot of people, it seems to me like a lot of people, what they think doing news is sitting around and watching Facebook for somebody to post something, and then call them and ask them why they did that and where you can find the information. Man, you talk about a lazy bunch of people.
Well, and, you watch the work product, it's obvious that, a lot of the articles are just rote. By the way, by rote, I mean that they're just kind of routine, that there's no, imagination that goes into them.
Yeah, the spelling's different.
Yeah. But, when I'm sent an article for the Open Range Record, I go through it, I read the whole thing, and I've got questions. Hey, you didn't explain this well enough. By the way, this whole paragraph is kind of needs to be reworked. So, we make an effort to go through it. Some of the other media, they don't really do that. Jake in the Cow Pie, not a lot of fun to watch.
Or they'll take an article from another news source and reprint it with absolutely no double checking or confirmation.
Well, so that's an interesting one. Even when somebody sends us a letter to the editor, I send it to our copy editor, and you don't always catch all the things that are misspelled or punctuation or whatever, and we'll fix if there's a missing period or something, we'll put that in there, or if there's a misspelled word, we put the little SIC in parentheses, so
right,
that
right.
we did catch it.
We didn't make this mistake.
There is one exception to that, and I kind of go back and forth with this, but if you send me a campaign announcement or a piece from, maybe you're a candidate and you wrote an op-ed and you send it to me, more than likely that thing's getting published as is.
So that's part of it. And the other part of it is if there are inaccuracies contained within that, Wildfile came out years ago with an article about me and Oath Keepers, and it included a number of inaccuracies, and it was picked up and reprinted
all over the place.
And this was before I was even actually, I don't think I'd ever announced for any office yet.
I don't think you'd even considered it.
Well, I considered it when I was 12.
Okay, fair enough.
but they just, rubber stamp, reprinted it, and it went out all over the state in almost every paper, and it was inaccurate.
So let me address that one. So if I catch something in there that's not accurate, I'll do one of two things. Either A, it'll get an editor's note, said, look, this piece says this, here's the truth, here's where you can find it. Or if I happen to like you, no, I'm just kidding. Or I'll reach out and say, look, this isn't correct, and I know it's not. So we're not going to print it. You can fix it if you want to, and then we'll consider it. But
yeah, because if you print something, your name's on it as well.
Yeah, exactly right.
And you hold the same responsibility to your readers.
Okay, so we've got about 30 minutes left, and I've already got the phones open. So if you got something that you want to talk about or comment on the whole Goshen County thing, the phone number is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. I'll leave the phone lines open for the rest of the program, so if there's something you want to comment on, go ahead and hit me up. To the Turkey Vulture, the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. Christy Racinas, separating facts, feelings, and finances with the Cheyenne Housing Project. Now, one of the city councilmen, Seagrave, he's been all over the Wyoming media saying how terrible the State Lands Board is, and how they've prevented 260 homes from being built. So it's not 260 homes, it's 260 apartmental units. Secondly, that's not the role of government to provide you a house. Third, what you said about the housing stuff isn't entirely accurate, as our state auditor points out. And I quote, at its most recent meeting, the State Loan and Investment Board denied a grant request by the city of Cheyenne for $2.175 million toward the First and Union so-called, and so-called is my insertion in there, affordable housing project. As one of the 5 statewide elected officials on SLIB, I have received a decent amount of criticism surrounding this decision, and that's okay. But while my constituents may know my vote, they don't always know why. At the same SLIB meeting, they were tasked by the legislature with distributing a $5 million pot of funds for, quote, unmet housing needs. Cheyenne, however, did not submit its affordable housing request to this unmet housing needs fund, which would have been the best fit. Instead, they requested the funding from your favorite outfit, Ken, the Wyoming Business Council, from their Business Ready Communities Fund. Asked to use these funds for affordable housing has never been done before. The BRC Fund, or the Business Ready Communities Fund, is not a housing fund. Per state law, it is an economic development fund with the goal of creating and retaining high-paying jobs. In other words, attracting or expanding businesses that pay above average wages. And then there is the secondary problem with their grant request. Let's see here. Where was it? In here. So here we go. Here it is. And she continues, you got to skip a couple paragraphs in this, but she says, one thing I've learned is that my folks, myself included, often use the word affordable in housing conversations. However, it's important to note that the word affordable means something very specific in terms of housing. Typically, that applicants must fall below strict federal income limits. Cheyenne's proposed project was targeted at individuals making 60% of the area's median income, while teachers, first responders, new professionals, many employees come to Cheyenne. A better fit would have been, instead of affordable housing, which, thank you, Auditor Racinas, for recognizing that words mean things. I mean, it's you got me right in the heart on that one. It should have been workforce or attainable housing. But they called it affordable housing, and in their own grant request, it wasn't affordable housing. So, Seagrave, you can talk all you want in the Wyoming media, but you're the one that screwed up on this thing, and we're not in favor of it anyway. But you should have submitted your grant properly.
I just wanted to back up kind of to the 30,000-foot big picture. And how come you wacko conservatives are against people getting food and housing? Comes down to whatever government gives, it can also take away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see people put in a position where they are completely dependent upon government for essential purposes. Now, like we said, if you've got developmental disabilities or something that you cannot provide for yourself, there is a place for that. But to take able-bodied people and make them fully dependent upon government, with the shekels go the shackles.
Yep.
If you listened carefully when we were talking about SNAP benefits, there were bills that were coming down to limit the types of foods you could buy with that.
Of course.
So the government is going to say, okay, this is healthy, this is not. You can have this, you can have that. Who wants a government with that kind of power?
I don't. As it relates to food benefits, I've often been in favor of the, if you're going to have, SNAP or whatever, you have the government food store. And it is exactly the same stuff that we provide to our troops. If it's okay for our guys serving overseas, it's okay for you.
Maybe that's okay.
I don't know. I mean, if you're going to do it at all, I think that's what you should do.
I would kind of lean toward, you're going to get the basics. You're going to get a sack of flour. You're going to get a sack of sugar.
The big block of cheese.
You're going to get, a block of cheese. You're going to get maybe some milk. You're definitely not going to get a bunch of processed garbage.
No. And it's, if we're going to do that at all, I mean, we should limit it to what the intended purpose being. When I lived in Virginia, it would irritate me to no end to see the stacks and stacks and stacks of food in carts. And, when I first moved there, I didn't realize how big of a problem this was. But at one point, there's this, lady by herself. She's got 2 carts full of stuff. And I said, well, here, let me help you with this. And I'll help, we'll get it out to your car and I'll give you a hand. And I walk out there and she's loading this stuff into the back of a brand new Lincoln Navigator. So you got this brand new expensive SUV, and I watched you pull out, your government food card. That's not what that program was meant to do.
I'd been in the Army probably 4 years at the time, and I was a brand new buck sergeant.
Okay.
And because of the size of my family and living in Europe, we still qualified for food stamps. We qualified for WIC. With the little kids, we did take the WIC, so you got the milk and cheese or whatever was under that. But I never took the food stamps or whatever, and we would go to the commissary and take whatever we had budgeted for that and do the very best we could. Diane, bless her heart, is so good at being able to stretch $1 where a $10 bill should be. And we'd go through the checkout line, and then we'd see somebody coming up behind us with 2 or 3 carts full of junk.
All processed food, and none of it really good for you.
And it just, it's not good.
Now, in another story, completely different subject, the hearts of the Wyoming media are dashed. The hopes are dashed, Ken. Their hearts are crushed. All of their dreams have been dashed.
Aw.
Yeah, I mean, it's really terrible. I feel really bad for them. But Governor Mark Gordon has at least announced that he is not going to seek a third term. Because first, he's term limited. Now, second, if he were to seek a third term, he would have to go to court to do it. But this is from the very liberal Cap City News. Let's see what they say. Mark Gordon will not seek a third term. His office announced today, that would be, today. Gordon met with his cabinet and set an agenda for the remainder of his administration, focusing on core energy industries, economic growth, and natural resources. The announcement follows the recent passage of the Essentials budget by the Wyoming legislature. We're going to run through the tape strong, Gordon said. We've just come off of a solid legislative win, securing the Essentials budget to help meet the needs of the people of Wyoming, but we're not done yet. The governor plans to begin a series of community visits in June. The tour will include public forums and downtown tours through the fall. Gordon says he intends to discuss property tax protections with local citizens ahead of the August 8th primary. Let's see here. But it doesn't say if he was asked if there was another office he was going to run for. And that's kind of what I've been wondering. You know, it doesn't really make a lot of sense that he's been doing this much messaging if there wasn't something else that he was doing. I mean, the guy's everywhere. I get at least an email a day, a stupid on-brand thing that he sends out. So I just, you know, I don't buy that he's done with politics. I don't know what he's going to do.
What else would he do?
I don't know. Maybe
not
there's
qualified
a Senate
for anything
run.
else, really.
Well, he's qualified. There's a lot of people that are elected that aren't qualified. Most of them sit on the Goshen County School Board. But I don't know. I mean, it just something tells me he might be doing something else. I don't know. I'm just looking at the messaging and all the emails he's sending out, all of the town halls he's doing. You wouldn't do that if you were just going to kind of, you know, fade away into the ether, or not the ether. That's kind of mean. Into the
go back home to the ranch.
Fade away into the distance. There we go. Back home to Buffalo to go to his ranch. Now, in another interesting story, I think it's kind of interesting. Oregon man challenges Yellowstone's rules as unconstitutional overreach. Now, this kind of goes back to the story we were talking about earlier, where bureaucracies create their own rules. And the question is, can the national park create rules on its own that aren't necessarily law? From the cow pie. An Oregon man accused of violating Yellowstone National Park's fishing restrictions and a road closure is challenging the park's rules as unenforceable under the Constitution. Tate Pulliam filed a motion to dismiss his citations Monday in U.S. District Court, asking the park's magistrate, Stephanie Hambrick, to dismiss 3 citations he faces as government overreach. Pulliam's advocacy team, the Pacific Legal Foundation, hinges its argument on the U.S. Constitution's language about how the federal government can appoint officials, as well as on language limiting lawmaking power to Congress. Quote, Tate went to Yellowstone to enjoy public land and left facing criminal charges, they said, but Congress never made his alleged actions illegal. Instead, a park superintendent invented the rules behind these charges, resulting in massive overcriminalization. So the question is, now we're at a national park. So we're outside. The first time we talked about this, it was a state agency. Now this is a federal agency in a national park. And the question is, can the federal government pass a law that says a park administrator can restrict usage of the park or something? According to this, to the Pacific Legal Foundation, the question or the answer to that is no. What do you think, Ken? I mean, can you do that? Can you pass a law that says this agency can create its own binding rules?
Well, you can do anything that you want. Is it right? Is it defensible? Is maybe another one. Think about a national park being a gun-free zone.
Ah, another good one there.
Yeah. Can they do that? I think they try.
Well, they do try.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's legal or not.
And that's the question. It just goes back to how do you interpret constitutionality? So somebody's got to be charged, and then you've got to have a legal battle.
And that's the way our system works. If you think that a law is unjust or wrong or unconstitutional, or insert the adjective there, the way that you challenge it is you have to violate the law, you get charged, and then you go to court, and your defense is this is unconstitutional.
But of course, who has time for that or money?
The Pacific Legal Foundation.
So effectively, that means that, yes, they can do pretty much whatever they want, because until somebody pins them down and fights it, it's going to be the rule.
Sure. All right. So here's what the last part of the cow pie says. Hambrick, who is the judge, countering these arguments before they existed via one of her orders last year in the Sunseri case. She wrote that the relevant case law doesn't support the idea that Congress has unconstitutionally passed down its lawmaking authority through a bureaucracy and onto park authorities. Let's read that again. Wrote that the relevant case law doesn't support the idea that Congress has unconstitutionally passed down. All right, so it's a double negative. It's a problem with writing the article. Essentially what they're saying is it doesn't follow from the case law that the bureaucracy, that is the National Park Service, creating a law is unconstitutional. It doesn't support that idea. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling from 2004 found that the national park could enforce rules as a necessary and proper function of the federal government. This is obviously going to go to court, but it's an interesting case, and Ken, I think you bring up probably the biggest headline out of it, which is, can they prevent you from carrying your sidearm in a national park, or any gun for that matter?
Yeah, there are other rules that are kind of no-brainers, like you can't walk across a sensitive hot spring or something like that. We have you can't harass the
wildlife.
There are ones like that make sense, but it starts getting into.
I think
there are so many woke
touchy
things that could come into play.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's you walk into like a federal court building. Our federal court building's different than the national park. I think it's an interesting case, and we'll hopefully see some coverage on it. Speaking of court cases, this is one, and I know I've received a little bit of criticism that maybe I'm taking too much glee in this person's charges. Let me tell you why. Because the person that we've been covering, I know her, and of course I'm talking about April Marie Morgenroth, or otherwise known as Marie Hamilton. I know her. I've talked to her on several occasions. She's been on this program, but I find it really offensive that you take what it is that I do for a living, and you, for lack of a better term, you bastardize it. You lie in stories, you make stuff up about people. I find that really offensive. And then it really fries me when you do it to one of my friends, namely Agent 29.
Well, it's a reflection on the entire trade, on the entire industry. And that's why, for example, the bar is able to chasten one of their own. Yeah. Because it degrades the entire industry.
Well, and, to a certain extent, that happens in the field of journalism when a self-proclaimed journalist does wrong, makes up stuff about people. generally other journalists hop on and say, no, you're making the rest of us look bad.
It happens every time Wildfile is updated.
Every time they print an article. So anyway, Morgan Roth had a court appearance. This is in the Cowboy. And by the way, this is one of those fun stories where different media outlets covered the same story in a different way. And it's, the Cowboy has their way of going about it. The Open Range Record, we covered mostly her time, Morgan Roth's time in Arizona and the charges she got there, and a little bit about what happened in Colorado. The Denver Post printed an article that was pretty comprehensive, actually. And so it's been fun to watch all of the different reporting from different perspectives. But Morgan Roth was back in court, and here's what the Cowboy says. A reporter was in a Wheatland courtroom again Wednesday to face 10 felony forgery charges, different felony forgery charges from the first ones. That's on top of the 10 that she's already facing. The Wyoming newspaper reporter accused of forging documents related to an attempted home purchase made a quick appearance Wednesday in the Wheatland courtroom. So the first one was the fraudulent documents that were alleged fraudulent documents that were submitted in a complaint to the governor's office. That's the first set of charges. This one is about her attempting to purchase a home and allegedly forging documents from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I don't know why there aren't federal charges. I expected to see some of those. Let's see here. During the 10-minute hearing Wednesday, they told the judge that Hamilton waived a formal reading of her rights and the charges against her. In that latest case, she's charged with 5 counts of possession of forged writing and 5 counts of forgery related to the USDA documents and 2 invoices from contractors. The judge asked Platte County prosecutor Douglas Weaver for his recommendation, and they slapped her with a $20,000 personal recognizance bond. What that means is she's out free on her own, but if she skips bail or something, she owes the court $20,000. It's a personal recognizance bond, and she's also on a $5,000 cash bond as well. Let's see here. Morgan Roth declined to comment in the court, and she said no thank you to the judge. Court documents show the latest charges against Hamilton stem from that investigation that happened into those documents in the other case. So the case is ongoing. So far, she's got 20 different charges on her. So I'll keep you updated on that one as things go. And let's see, we've got about 7 minutes to go. And another example of why I love the Texas Rangers. This is, I've told this story before, but a couple of years ago, my beautiful bride and I were in Dallas for a hair event. My wife's a salon owner, so we were down there for that. At the time, she didn't own the salon, but that was coming. And while we were in Dallas, I say, well, let's see if the Rangers are in town. Let's go to a game. And they were, and so we walk into the stadium, and it was in June. Not a pride flag to be found, not anything referencing so-called Pride Month. In fact, we walked up to the beer cart, and I ordered 2 fake beers, and the gal handed me 2 Budweiser Zeros, and I must have snarled or something, because it was during the time that everybody was, mad at Bud Light and was boycotting them, and she says, listen, this is Texas Ranger Stadium. There's none of that woke crap here. She used the other word. Do you want a beer or not? And I was like, oh, well, yeah, we'll take it. And it was so much fun to watch the game, and there was no politics. It was just a baseball game, 13 innings worth. So, we were there for the long haul. But I decided then I'm going to be a Texas Rangers fan. Well, now there's another controversy that's being attempted. People are attempting to gin up. From the New York Times, more than a month after the Texas Rangers unveiled a One Riot, One Ranger statue at Globe Life Stadium, the New York Times is still moaning. I guess this is from Breitbart talking about the article in the New York Times. The statue in question is a 12-foot-tall bronze Texas Ranger statue with a ubiquitous cowboy hat and a pistol on his hip, which was dedicated at the stadium on March 2nd and now stands in the left field concourse Ken, I've got a video of the unveiling of that statue, if you'd play it for us. It's pretty short. There he is, the Texas Ranger statue in Texas Ranger Stadium.
At least it didn't bend his hat.
No, it didn't bend his hat.
You know what I'm referring to.
Yes.
The broken bat on the...
Yeah, exactly right. So now critics say the statue depicts Texas Ranger Captain Jay Banks, who they say was the ranger who led efforts to maintain segregated schools. Activists further claim that the title of the statue, One Riot, One Ranger, was derived from a report of the Rangers restoring order when a black man was accused of assaulting a white woman, and he was kidnapped by an angry white mob and burned alive in 1930. The left-wing rag, The Athletic, claimed the team was wary of its statue and accused the MLB team of trying to soft-sell the statue's March debut by holding a ceremony during spring training. Well, to their credit, the Texas Rangers said, screw you guys, we're putting up our statue anyway. And that's what they did. And just another rejection of all of this woke nonsense, as we should all reject it. It's all bullcrap, and none of us should pay any attention to it. And yet another reason why I love the Texas Rangers, even when they lose to the Oakland Athletics by a run, when they should have won that game. Well, that'll do it for today's installment of the broadcast. We've got tomorrow, Open Line Friday, calls all program long. So have a good afternoon, my friends, and we'll see you tomorrow.